Laura Anderson, and I teach in the College of Education at Lee University. The students that I teach are going to be elementary or middle grade students, approximately 6 years old to 13 years old. And one of the things that we teach them is how to address science concepts in the classroom. So today my plan is to share with you some of the things that we want our students to be able to do by the time they complete their middle school grades. Doing what scientists do is the title of my presentation, because we want students to understand that science is not just something that's in a laboratory, but it's something they can apply to their daily lives. You will see a list of the science processing skills, including observing, communicating, comparing, classifying, measuring, predicting, and inferring, as well as some of the more complex skills of defining operationally, formulating models, and investigating by applying the scientific process. For today's lesson, we're going to take a look at the 5 basic process skills. These are the ones that you want to make sure that your students have firmly in place before they investigate things that are more difficult for them. So we will take a look at observing, communicating, classifying, predicting, and inferring. We're going to go first to the basic process skill, which is that one of observing. Observing means that they're using any of their 5 senses to make descriptions or to learn about something. Obviously, observation will be one, but also the others such as touch, sound, feel, and smell would be appropriate as well. This is basic to all of the other process skills. If they're not able to make great observations, they will have difficulty with the others as well. And they also can have 2 types. Quantitative, where they're actually counting objects or counting things in order to describe it, or qualitative, where they will use words to describe their observations. I've got several things here today that I just got from my office. There's nothing magic about this. In fact, throughout all of the 5 process skills that I'm going to talk to you about today, use the things that you have available to you in your environment, okay? The first thing that I'm going to show you is a clay water jar. And for young children, immediately they're probably going to describe this in terms of its color and shape. That's very, very common with young children. So they might say that this water pot is round in shape and has somewhat of a spout here. They would say that it's basically brown and would have colors such as yellow, blue, green, white, and pink as decoration on the outside. So they have made an observation using their words. They could also say that you're able to take the cup off of the top and obviously pour the water from here into the cup, which helps to serve as a way of getting water later on. So that is just a very basic description of their observation of an object. The next one uses their hearing to observe. And I have just some containers here. These are actually Easter eggs, plastic Easter eggs, but any type of small container would do well. A small box, a can, anything like that. And I've placed different objects on the inside because the different objects, when you shake them, will make different sounds. I want you to just listen to the difference in the 5 objects I have here. Now some are very close, but some are quite distinct. So what observations might they make? Well, first of all, they may say, I think there's more than one because of the sound of the rattle. Some, they could actually use touch because they could say some are heavier than others. And then they might just estimate or guesstimate what each of the containers hold. Such as in this particular one, I just have some pennies, some coins. In this one, I have some dried beans. So it makes a different sound than what the coins did. The coins were more metallic. This was not. This one has just some office supplies, paper clips. And I have more dried beans, but these are smaller. Therefore, they have a different sound in them than what the dried limas do. And finally, some buttons. Just very common objects that you would find around your house or your school. Once again, use the things that are common to you that you would be able to get. And finally, on the way to this session today, I looked down because we had rain last night here, and I found an earthworm that was crawling on the sidewalk. So I brought the earthworm, I scooped him up and brought him here, and they could take a look at something that perhaps day to day they would just avoid or just, walk around and make some great observations, both quantitative and qualitative. Qualitative, they could say he is about maybe 3 inches, 4 inches long. He is a grayish color. There is something coming out of the end. I don't know if somebody stepped on him or exactly what that is. But he also has a number of stripes here. They could count the number of stripes for quantitative and just describe with their words any other things that would show that they are observing this particular earthworm. Once again, start with observing for your first skill because it is the foundation and the basis of all of the other process skills. The next process skill that we will investigate is called communicating. When scientists make studies or make discoveries, they want to share with each other what they have learned. Obviously, if they're doing a research project, they want to know what other people have learned so that they don't have to take the time to repeat all of the research, but instead they can build on what someone else has already done. Now, our students need to learn to communicate as well. This is a great opportunity that you would have to integrate the language arts with writing and with reading, and even math with charts and graphs and things of that nature. So the definition for communicating is the use of the spoken and written word, graphs, drawings, and diagrams to share information and ideas with others. And we start, of course, with observing. We have them to observe some sort of event. And then they can verbally communicate and tell what they have observed by looking at something, touching it, smelling, tasting, or hearing if it makes some sort of a sound. And then they can communicate. They can draw. They can write. They can make charts and graphs. They can count. And up on the screen now, you will see an example of what one child did to communicate her observations about a cricket. You see that this is Rita's observation, and she started by saying, I looked at a cricket. She drew a picture, which is a pretty good picture. As you see there, it is recognizable as a cricket, but even if it's a younger child whose drawing is not this advanced, that's all right too. Have them to draw a picture of what they saw. And then have them to write with words their observations. It might be just a sentence for a very young child. It might be a much more detailed description for older children, just whatever the child is capable of doing. And here are some things that Rita noticed about the cricket. It had 4 legs and it had two little things up in the front that it ate with. Now, her vocabulary is not that detailed, but her observation skills are pretty good because she saw that it did indeed have legs, and then there was something that it was eating with at the front. It had little lines on the bottom, and it chirped for me, which is the hearing part that was integrated. And I looked and saw little wings moving. And that's an excellent example of how Rita used her observation skills to communicate what she saw with this little cricket. Our next process skill is that of classification, grouping objects or things in ways that they are alike. The first thing that you would want to do would be to obtain objects that can be placed into more than one category. And I just had a collection of seeds that I use for this particular purpose. Sometimes if I'm eating a piece of fruit and I have seeds from an orange or from an apple or even a pit from a peach, I just collect those, dry them out, and then put them in my classroom to have students address this particular skill. And then the next step says find out how they are alike and how they are different. So you would just have them to observe them initially. Remember, observation is the basic skill that you want them to develop. So have them first to look at the seeds. And children may say, well, they're different colors. And that's true. They are different colors. Others may say they're different sizes. And that's certainly true too, because if you look at the size of this little seed compared to the seed, which is the pit here, they are different sizes. Others might say they're different shapes. And that's true. You could classify them perhaps by shapes. But ultimately, you want them to choose one way to show how they are alike. And so we may decide to group them by color. So the students would probably take the beans that are brown, put them in one group, the beans that are white in another group, and notice that the white ones are not exactly alike. They're not all the same. Some are larger, some are smaller. And we also have some black beans that are dried. And so I would put those in a group together as well. And then we actually have, I see some sunflower seeds here that are black and white. So they may decide to put those in another group by themselves because they're just a bit different from the others. But ultimately, they could classify the beans here, or the seeds, by color to demonstrate their understanding of classification by group. Our next process skill is that of prediction. The use of data to forecast future events based on, we're going back here to the very first process skill, observations and inferences. So the first step is have the students to observe and think about what they already know about the situation. Predict, tell what you think is going to happen, and then test your prediction, make observations, and then you might revise or make a more accurate observation after you've done your first investigation. Sink and float is one activity that you could utilize to develop prediction skills with your students. Get a container, fill it with water, and then just get a number of objects that you can place into the container to see if they will sink or if they will float. I would have the students before testing the objects to group them as to those they think will sink and those they think will float. So I will do that now. I have a pen, and I'm pretty certain that that is going to sink. I have a rubber band. I think that will probably float. I have just a rubber stopper here, and I think that will probably sink as well, as will the kidney bean. I think that the flower seed may float because of the type of material that it's made of. I'm pretty sure the leaf is going to float. The plastic pen cover is probably going to float. And then the plastic egg, I think, will float as well. So we'll start now and try the prediction that I had for the three that I think will sink. So we'll start with a stopper. And indeed, it did sink. Now we have the kidney bean. It sank as well. And the pen is a bit wide, but let's just see if it tries at all to float. And that's a bit inconclusive because all right, the heavier end does sink, but if it were not in there, the plastic would float. Now let's try the ones that I predicted would float. We have the egg, and indeed, it does float. The pen cover, it floats as well. The sunflower seed floats. The rubber band, it floated as well. Now the leaf is also a bit wide, so I'm just going to tear off a portion of that to see if it will sink or float. And indeed it floats as well. So this basic knowledge using prediction should come before a discussion or a lesson on buoyancy, and asking students, why do you think some objects floated and others sank? So it's a great way to integrate prediction. Our final process skill is that of inferring. By definition, inference is the use of a logical thought process to show a relationship between the observations or provide an explanation of an observation. So first you need to provide the students with some sort of object or something that is happening. Have them think about what they are observing, and then give an explanation for their observations. They can then make further observations to compare and think and explain again. We're going to just start with some basic inferences by looking at pictures. You can use any types of pictures. You can also use objects that you might have there, but use anything that you have at your disposal where the students would have to look at that and draw a conclusion or make an inference based on their knowledge and what they're observing. For example, you could actually have an apple or a piece of fruit that had a bite out of it and say, what inference can you make about this piece of fruit? And obviously, someone has taken a bite out of it. It's not that somebody dropped it. How do you know they didn't cut part of the apple out? Well, I can observe that there are teeth marks. It looks like a bite has been taken out of it. So that's a good example of an inference. You may go outside and have them to look at the ground. They might see footprints there and say, someone has been here because I see footprints on the ground. Do you think it was a human, a man, a woman? Do you think it was an animal? And they'll say, well, I think it was a human being because the footprint looks as though it would be a human being there. Okay? and just many other things that you could do. If a child came in with an umbrella that was wet, you did not have windows in your classroom, you might have them to make the inference that it's raining outside, using what they have observed and making an inference from that. I hope that these 5 basic process skills will help you to introduce your children to the wonderful world of science, that world which has God's fingerprints all over it, because He is our creator. He created life here on earth, and it is such a joy to use observation, communication, classification, prediction, and inference to learn more about the world around them. Thank you.